I'm Evan DeWald, and I am joined by Tara Lindsley, and we are the voices behind the Unpacked podcast. On the Unpacked podcast, one of the things we love to do is talk about life and storytelling, and sometimes life gets messy and vulnerable and all those things. So we have conversations with counselors, with psychologists, with industry leaders, storytellers, and just regular humans that are making a difference in the world.
Yeah, and we're just hoping to grow and reflect and heal together. So you can find our podcast anywhere you subscribe to your podcasts. New episodes come out every Thursday. Enjoy.
Make sure to like and subscribe.
See you there. Hey, Tara.
Hey,
How you doing?
I'm pretty good. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good.
Today was fun.
Yeah, it was fun. Lots of good guests.
Yeah.
Looking forward to this new ice challenge.
Yeah, we have a new challenge to try on Reels, I think.
Yes, but related to the guests we just had, so maybe we'll have to wait and do it right before we release that episode.
Okay, deal.
It was kind of a cool exercise that a psychologist was sharing with us.
Yeah, and you're really promoting the idea of Slurpee, so I think actually I'm going to need a Slurpee that day too.
Yeah, you can also have a Slurpee. And just pound back a really cold margarita.
It's a cool thing between your brain. A margarita would be great. It's a cool thing between your brain and the ice, so we want to try this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it basically messes with your head so that you can regulate your emotions.
Yeah. So cool.
That was definitely not the technical description of what's happening, but hey, we should try it. Let's give it a go. I'm excited. It's going to be October here real soon.
Yeah.
October brings Halloween.
One of our faves.
I like Halloween.
It's such a good night.
Although, you know what? I'm not a big dress up person. I don't like to dress up.
Yeah, I know.
That's been obvious over the last few years.
Yeah.
I like to be comfortable, which means,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, me too. I have a bit of a challenge with it too, because I'm like, if I have a good idea, but I have a hard time like spending a ton of money on it.
Yeah.
For one night, and then you want to be comfortable.
Yeah.
So
and it seems like all the costumes that adults have to pick out are like giant onesies or
slutty.
Have some or slutty. Yeah. Or
for women.
For women. Yeah. I wasn't thinking they would be for me. I was thinking like plastic face masks that you wear for like 2 minutes at the beginning of the party. And then you're like, yeah, this is dumb.
Yeah. But we have a good idea this year that our group of friends is going to do.
What are we doing?
Charlie and the Chocolate Factory.
Oh, awesome.
I mean, I'm putting it out there now, so now we'll really have to try and pull it off.
And so even beyond the party, the costumes,
mm-hmm.
I hope we'll see how the weather turns and all that kind of stuff. What kind of ambition we got kind of going on that night. But I love doing a fire on the driveway.
Yeah. How come?
Just because the neighbors come by.
Yeah.
And they come over, they can, if it's cool, they can warm up a little bit. We give out some hot chocolate usually, or hot dogs or something like that. And people are out and about. Kids are excited, they're getting the candy, they're getting all that kind of stuff. And you get a chance to meet your neighbors and just interact. And I love that.
It's so fun. It is a good night for it. Especially if you don't know your neighbors. It's a great night to meet them and
really
meet their
is.
kids.
It's super fun. And
yeah.
So hopefully we pull that off. And
yeah, I hope it's warm enough that we can do that and we don't have to wear snowsuits and just make the dads go out. There probably won't be a lot of little kids. It'll be
well, there will be one. Our special little guy will be here.
That's right.
So here's the thing. Otto's 13. He didn't dress up last year. He went trick-or-treating. He cheated. But
I think we all made him go with the kids.
Yes. Yeah. So I'm not going out of obligation anymore if I go.
Wow. You're going because you would want to?
Yeah. My buddies should be honored that I would choose to go with them if I go. Anyways.
He won't tell you or show it. But.
That's right. That's exactly right. So tell me, what's Theo going to dress up as?
I ordered him a firefighter costume.
Oh man.
Because he's obsessed with firefighters. He got to go to a fire station at day home.
Yeah.
And he's obsessed with fighting fires. So I thought that'd be fun.
Like with his fists?
No, he understands that you use water, but we play a lot with the Paw Patrol. They rescue people and fight fires. Awesome. So he's super into that.
Hey, today we have Rob Lawless.
Yeah.
And he has a pretty ambitious vision and goal. So his goal is to meet and have a legitimate conversation with 10,000 people.
Yeah, one-on-one for an hour.
For an hour. And he's at 5,000 something now.
Yeah, like halfway, more than halfway.
Yeah, he's over halfway. So he's starting to get a little bit of people are noticing him, right? I think it's always, you have a big ambitious goal like this that takes years. And it's like the first few years is just got to feel like you're never going to reach your goal.
And probably people don't understand
Yeah.
really the vision you have for it or what you know it could be. And he talks about that. Like he shares with us some of the failures and some of the successes.
Yeah. Like I'm sure even his family didn't understand that. Yeah.
Right? It's hard to grasp. How are you going to do this? And how's it going to happen? And he's meeting people like around the world.
Yeah.
Like he will meet you in person or on Zoom.
Yeah. Or on Zoom.
And then
Yeah.
he writes up a little story.
It's true even of coaching. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to be a coach. My mom's like, what does that mean?
Welcome to my world. Nobody knows what communications and
no one
marketing
knows.
is.
We should do an episode on that.
Yeah,
Tara,
maybe.
tell me, what is communications? Do you get an education for that? Or do you just talk a lot?
Yeah. That is what people think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we should totally do that. Anyways, he's got this big vision. We had a chance to meet with him for an hour. You met with him for an hour.
Yeah.
You were one of the 5,400 people.
Yeah, I was. It was super fun. He has like agendaless conversations. So there is no structure to it, which is kind of my worst nightmare, but I did it anyways.
So he just gets on there and it's like, hi.
Hey.
So your name is Tara.
Yeah, he's actually really good at it.
Yeah, I think so.
Like he's very calming and he makes you feel really comfortable. And he'll ask some questions, but he also leaves a lot of space for you to just talk to.
Yeah. And tell whatever stories you want or
Yeah.
talk about whatever you want.
And then he just kind of takes a snippet of it and shares it on his Instagram.
He clearly has a passion for meeting people, getting to know people, hearing their stories and all of those kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny because I was doing an Instagram story this morning. I didn't even post it. I was like, do you ever think about purpose? Like what you actually, like, I think we talk a lot about purpose. We find a job with purpose, find like all these things. And I was like, I think that's all good. I really do. And I think sometimes you have to do work, your job, whatever it might be. And I was trying to articulate, okay, what's Evan's purpose? Like, what do I want to be about? Eventually it came down to, I want to be a safe person that helps people grow.
Yeah, that's a good purpose.
Yeah. But some days you have to like do your bookkeeping.
It's not all the dream.
Your purpose every day. You know, it's like, it's hard work to achieve a purpose. Rob says this. It was hard work. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure, you know, when you hit 1,000 and you realize, wow, I have 9,000 more to reach my goal.
And he kept going.
And he kept going.
And he'll meet anyone. So even if you want to go meet with him,
if you're listening
you can.
today, call and you need somebody to talk to, call Rob.
To call him. You can
you
DM
can just
him.
DM him and be like, hey, I need somebody to talk to.
Yeah, you can share anything.
Yeah. Anyways, I watch him on Instagram. He posts those conversations and the story, like a picture with the person and just a little bit about what he learned about the person. And it's kind of cool.
It is really cool. And he shares a lot of what he learned in this process, which was amazing to hear why he's doing this. And with us, he shares, you know, what's been inspiring about it for him.
Yeah. Anyways, hey, we're glad that you've decided to join us. Hey, I hope that you're liking, you're subscribing, that you're leaving us a review. Some folks are doing that.
Yeah.
Hey, I hope you enjoy Rob. Thanks for joining us.
Hello.
Hey.
How's it going? I almost got a nice mic set up, but I did not.
Well, you can if you want. You have a minute.
It's all good. It would be my first time setting it up. I fear it will like mess with it was like a last minute thought because my friend, she had bought this for like a podcast or something, used it like one time and then gave it to me and I have yet to use it. Yeah, I just opened it up. I was like pulling her hair out of it.
Hey, I heard you woke Tara up really early this morning and had a long conversation with her.
I did. It was her choice.
It was.
I did give her the option of 8 a.m.
Breakfast with a 3-year-old in an interview doesn't seem to.
No, those don't go very well, do they?
No.
Yeah, we took the best route.
Yeah, it was actually great. Honestly, I've been early to everything today. At day home, I dropped him off, and my day home lady was like, "Oh, you guys are early," and I was like, I've been up for a bit.
Yeah, I'm ready to go.
I'm ready to go to everything.
You start the morning at 5:30 a.m.
It's true.
You know.
Yeah, I told Rob this, but Ryan woke me up very nicely, which was great because he was up going to work, and I was like, "How about I don't set 17 alarms and you just wake me up?"
Oh, that is actually really nice.
Yeah,
it is way better. Do you have like a ringtone on your alarm? Mm-hmm. That like is it?
It's obnoxious.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, it's annoying. Or else, how else do you get up? Do people just like get out of bed?
Okay. I set 2.
You do? Okay. Do you hit snooze?
Mm-hmm. I do, yeah.
Yeah, me too.
And I try to get up on the snooze. My alarms are 6:48 and 7.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. That's pretty reasonable.
Yeah, I am not a snoozer.
Yeah. You just get up.
Yep.
Yeah. That's impressive.
And I do actually legitimately just get up. Hey, Rob, I'm so excited you decided to join us on the podcast and be a part of kind of what we're trying to do here. And it's funny, we were watching you and Tara kind of pointed out your Instagram to me, was like, hey, we should invite this guy on. This Rob guy is doing something kind of cool. And it kind of fits a little bit with what we're up to at Unpacked. And so mostly I'm just hoping to have a really fun conversation. And she told me you have agendaless conversations, which is my wheelhouse. I absolutely love agendaless conversations. You're doing something so interesting. It's fascinating what you were up to. Mm-hmm. And so part of our podcast on Unpacked is that we are trying to always unpack kind of the stories of people's lives and recognizing that those stories they sometimes get messy, and that there is opportunity to grow and learn in the midst of the messiness. Mm-hmm. and that, you know, this is kind of an interesting thing. I'm almost always trying to clean up the mess. Tara's admittedly less messy, but she always encourages me to slow down, not try to rush through stuff. Mm-hmm. Some of the things that, as a co-host and good friend, that's something that we definitely are learning from each other. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Like, tell us about your life and where you grew up. And you got siblings, or you have a great kitchen. I will point that out.
It's very neat.
That is a nice backdrop. Mm-hmm.
I get a lot of compliments on it, and I can't take any credit for it because I'm subletting. So none of this stuff is mine. I live in the Chinatown neighborhood of Philadelphia right now, which is basically, it's like downtown, quite close to City Hall, if you're familiar at all. But I've been here since January. And prior to that, I was moving around a lot for my project, but I grew up in the suburbs of Philadelphia. So in a town called Norristown, it's like a 40-minute drive outside of the city. Youngest of three, so I'm 31. I have a brother who's 33. He lives in New York City with his wife. And I have a sister who's 37. She lives back in the suburbs where I'm from, like 5 minutes from my parents. She is, married, has two boys, 2 years old and 6 months old. So I'm an uncle, which is cool. And grew up there. Nice, like middle-class upbringing. I went to Catholic school all the way up until college.
Oh, okay.
Then I went to Penn State and studied finance there. So not to be confused with Penn. So I went to the party school than the Ivy League school.
Oh, nice. Yeah, that's my favorite kind of school. Yeah.
Yeah. So 40,000 students. And it was very I liked it because I felt like you got a lot of well-rounded people there. And the social experience for me was more important than the academic one, I would say. It was a good balance, and you had to learn how to have that balance when you were a student there. And both my older siblings went there. So I had an idea of what to get involved with, and I really hit the ground running. I always loved people. So joined a lot of clubs and activities. I did this philanthropy to raise money for the fight against pediatric cancer. I was a tour guide for prospective students. I joined a fraternity. I did Habitat for Humanity trips, so I would build houses over spring breaks. And I was part of our homecoming effort. So I would just stack a new activity in each year. And the campus became really small. My brother was a junior when I was a freshman, but by the end of freshman year, I felt like I knew more people on campus than he did. And that was my experience for 4 years on top of studying finance. And then I minored in accounting and entrepreneurship, graduated 2013, launched into consulting for Deloitte. So I was in a very corporate environment, was based out of Philly, but traveled a lot for work. Then I left after a year and 3 months, went to this tech startup. They had 24 million in funding. I was their 80th employee, was on the sales team. So our sales team was 5 people, and it scaled up to 19. I started this project in that time. So I started this, and by this project, I mean this mission to spend an hour one-on-one with 10,000 different people. In November 11th of 2015 was the very first person I met. And then over the next 8 months, I met 100 more people alongside work or on the weekends. And then the company I worked for was bought out. I was laid off. This is July 2016. I decided to jump into this project full time, and the rest is history. And we can dive into it, but I'll stop there because that was a pretty long introduction.
No, that's great. That's
Mm-hmm.
quite the timeline of how it all plays out. Okay, so a couple questions I have for you. Favorite subject in school when you were growing up?
Math and art.
Those are very different.
That is okay.
But my life is very similar today because I have like this whole creative side of the project.
Yeah.
But in order to have this be my career, you need like the business kind of finance math side as well. So I like that split, and I guess it's been constant throughout my life.
Okay, interesting. Okay, that makes total sense. Like it does take some creativity to pull off, well, anything entrepreneurial and a little bit of like actual mathematics and mindset and logic and some of those things. Okay, so if you were one of three in your house, were you the kid who got in trouble or got everyone else in trouble?
No, that would be my brother. We were all pretty good, but I think my brother strayed furthest from my parents. I was great.
Would they say that?
They would up until recently. We were all good students and everything. But I always had the highest grades out of the three of us. And when I went to Penn State, so I don't know if it's the same in Canada, but they do like 4.0 GPA scale here in the States. And yeah, my first semester, I got a 4.0. So I got all A's in my classes. And I was also I was valedictorian in high school. So, and I don't know if it's the same in Canada, but typically it means you're like first in the class and you give like the speech at the end of high school. For my school, it was if you were in the top 10%, you could present the speech and then the faculty would choose. So that's what happened. I finished number 3 in my high school. It was a class of like 170 people, so it was not that big, but I gave the valedictorian speech and then went to school, like college, or for us, university, college, same thing. And I got this 4.0, and then I didn't want to drop in my GPA and I couldn't go up. So I maintained that halfway through my 3rd year. And then I dropped a little bit just because, it was like a senior and whatnot. But yeah, so I always had a better GPA than my siblings and I was always more involved than them. And then when I graduated, my salary was higher than both of my siblings, even though they had been out of school for years before me. And I had a girlfriend that my family really liked. And then when I left Deloitte is when it all started to crumble in their eyes. So yeah, I was great.
What was your decision to leave?
Why did I leave Deloitte? I just wasn't fulfilled and I was making good money. And I think the only promise I saw was more money in the future. And it just wasn't enough for me. And I looked and saw the people who were ahead of me as well. And it wasn't like they got paid more and they took on less responsibility and they got to relax a little bit. It was like they got paid more and they worked even more and they never saw their families. And work was always the priority in their life. And that has just not been that way for me. I minored in entrepreneurship in school. So I've always been interested in creating my own path too. And I don't subscribe to the belief that you have to work in an office until you're 65 years old. And then at that point you can retire and enjoy your life. It's just not something that has ever been attractive to me. So when I was in that and I had like everything that you're supposed to have on paper, like I had a great salary, I had great benefits, I was dating this girl, the program that I was in at Deloitte, they were going to pay for me to get my MBA at one of the top schools in the country here. So it would have been like Harvard or Wharton or Columbia, whatever. It's where all my colleagues went. It just wasn't interesting to me. So my mindset was I'm not going to seek to leave Deloitte, but if the right opportunity comes up, I'm going to hop on it. So I was actually working in Kentucky with a senior consultant. And like I would fly from Philly every week. He would fly from Houston. And I was telling him about this interest in entrepreneurship. And he said, you should talk to my friend Ben. He's one of my best friends from high school. He's the director of sales at this new startup in Philly. And that's how I just talked to his friend Ben. And I told him, I don't want to join your company. I'm just here to learn about how you had gone from private equity into the startup world, because I could see myself making a similar jump someday. And then my jump was actually to the company that Ben worked for. So yeah, it just was the right opportunity. They had $7.5 million in funding when I interviewed and they liked me and they kept pushing me off. And then at the time I was working in New York City and my girlfriend at the time was living there. So I was in no rush, but I just Googled the company one day and they had announced they raised an additional $16.5 million in funding. So I was like, 24 million, congrats. And then they messaged me back and they said, hey, it's time for you to join us. So that's how I made that shift.
Interesting.
Wow. So you decide not to take the like go to the next level of education, that next, all of those things. How did your family, like what, tell us about your parents. What are your parents like? Or like, was this I think you've already kind of suggested that they weren't overly impressed, but I'm curious to know, like, how did they handle that? What was that like?
Yeah, my mom cried when I told her.
Oh, that's hard.
Yeah. I have a great upbringing. My parents were really supportive, and it's funny because they created kind of the environment that would allow me to be confident enough to take on a project like the one I'm doing, or to be trusting enough of other people to take on a project, or to not have any trauma from the past to be able to do this. So I'm very thankful for that. But they're also very traditional in the sense where they think you go to school, get your job, find your spouse, settle down, have kids, and then repeat that cycle for your kids. And my dad worked for Verizon for 35 years. So his idea of a career is very specific. And my mom, like, she was working for AT&T for a number of years. And then when she had kids, she became a stay-at-home mom. And then she worked in a local elementary school in the cafeteria for like 20 years. So they had a very specific idea of how life was supposed to go. And being at Deloitte was like the top. It was right in line with what they wanted. And it's such a safe and secure company. Like, if I was still there today, I'd be making great money. I'd probably be married because it'd probably be something I was more focused on. I'd probably have my own house, my own car and whatnot. And that was what they wanted for me. Now I have none of those things. So I think they were fearful. Like, for some reason, I think for me, it was just a very natural thing. It's just this idea to pursue my own path. But I guess I have that tolerance for risk. Like, it doesn't bother me to throw caution to the wind. And part of it is I just trust myself to do the work. It would be a different story if I said I was going to meet 10,000 people and I met 20 and then I was like, oh, you know what? I'm tired of this. Let me go hang on the beach for 3 months. But I've not wavered from the goal at all since I started. And I think they didn't recognize that as much as I did. It's hard to explain your vision to someone because you don't have the answers all of the time. And I think because I lacked the answers up front, that made them nervous. But the difference was I was willing to walk in the darkness long enough to uncover those answers. And they didn't know that I was going to keep walking.
Yeah. As your parents, I'm sure they're also looking at you going, no, we don't want you to be in the darkness. Like, we want you to have the easy life and the life we always dreamed you would have, and like all those kind of things. I'm a parent of, I do not have 31-year-olds in my family, but I have a 25-year-old. So, and you're right. Like, as parents, it's really difficult not to place your dreams on top of your children. And it's not just your dreams. It's like your expectation of what your children are going to be like, how they're going to interact with the world. They're going to achieve, accomplish, contribute, like all those kind of words, right?
Yeah. And I was 24 when I started this, and I was 25 when I took it full time. So imagine you're a 25-year-old right now being like,
I'm going to hear some bunch of stories.
Yeah.
I think it's fascinating though. And to be honest with you, it's like, as much as I might make that joke or whatever, it's admirable to have the capacity and the freedom to have a vision, to have a dream, start working towards it, to make the sacrifices to make it happen, whether it's, this kind of an idea or anything. If you're an entrepreneur, it's the same thing. You start in a business and you're pretty much starving when you're starting a business. Like, and there's a level of desperation around what you're doing and how you're trying to get it done. So it's admirable. Okay. One thing before we ask you one of the next questions, I'm curious, what did you talk about at your high school graduation?
I don't want to brag, but I was getting my haircut like a year ago or so. The guy who cut my hair is 2 years above me in high school, and his younger brother was a migrant. And he was like, I still remember your speech.
What?
That's impressive. Yeah. Was there what's the theme of it? Or what's the life advice from it?
I got lucky because that was the year the Phillies won the World Series, which was the first time that any Philadelphia team had won a championship since 1980. So it was 2008. I graduated 2009, so it's the 2008-2009 school year. And the game that they actually won the World Series, it ended up being a rain delay. So they played the first half of the game, and then it had to go into the second half. And I remember being like, you never know when you're going to have a rain delay in life, but blah, blah, blah. You can still go on and win your own World Series. So I tied it into that. So that's why it was a hit.
Nice. That's a good legacy.
That is really good.
Yeah, that's smart. It actually ties in, like Evan doesn't know this necessarily, but it ties in our conversation earlier about now you are a public speaker as well. Like it is kind of interesting that there's some themes in your life for what you're doing that have played out.
Yeah. And similarly, people enjoy my speeches today, which is great. And I'm just as nervous today as I was back then to deliver them.
Yeah.
So it's constant.
Yeah. I in my previous career, I was public speaking a lot. Mm-hmm. And it is true. Like definitely when you get started, you're nervous. You got all those kind of things going on. You want to, change the world with everything. And then I ended up speaking to the same group of people consistently week after week. So then you start calming down a little bit more and finding your own little groove of how you can be yourself and speak words of truth that are helpful for people in life and all those kind of things. But you do calm down a little bit when you're talking to people that you've built relationship with. Still, I had to speak, was that 2 weeks ago? 2 weeks ago in front of a smaller group of people. I was nervous. This is a new feeling for me, or this is a familiar old feeling for me to stand up in front of people and talk.
Yeah. I find it's like fear of the unknown for me. And the more I do it, the more I know what that experience is going to feel like and what it's going to look like. Because once I'm up there and I know I'm not going to have a panic attack, I really enjoy it. So
once you get over the upset stomach and the bleeding ulcer, all those things. Yeah. Hey, so I am assuming, so you're 25, you start this project, you go full time when you're 26. What?
25 or 26?
Yeah, I started when I was 24. I went full time 25.
Mm-hmm. Okay. What is I would assume you have a bit of obsession with people's stories. If this was a vision to hear this many stories, what drives that? Where did you get the idea? But also maybe more importantly, where does a passion to hear people's stories come from? Like for a podcast that really is about story, I'm just really curious what inspired you there.
Yeah, it's funny when you say obsession. I don't even feel like it's an obsession with stories. Obviously, it appears that way, and it might be, but it's just a genuine curiosity in people. It's like an adventure for me. So I think the why now is I believe every human interaction, no matter how brief, has the potential to change your life. Because if I look back at my experience at Penn State, my life was undoubtedly changed by the connections I made there. I'm still very tight with my friends there. So a large portion of my fulfillment as a human being today comes from my relationships with those people. And it was just so organic. Like we just happened to sit next to each other in class, or we just happened to join the same club or be at the same party. And that to me was so fulfilling. And then you graduate and it's like everything has to be agenda driven. It didn't make sense to me why you would cut off such a valuable portion of your life just because you ended a phase of your life. So that was a big part of the inspiration was I want to continue meeting people in the future because it's been really valuable to me in the past. And for me, like I'm biased obviously, but there's only like you can try new foods and taste new drinks and go to different sites.
So many times. Yeah.
Yeah. And like, that's what you can do, or listen to different songs of our experience and the time we have on earth. But a really great way to color in your experience is to chat with other people and hear what their experience was. Because I just talked to a girl right before this who's from Honduras, and to learn a little bit more about Honduras, it just opens up my mind to something I haven't really discovered before.
I know, how I can relate to what you just said too, is that it's like, we started this podcast maybe a year and a half, maybe more than a year and a half.
Yeah, maybe more.
Somewhere in there. And what I have found has been really interesting. And we started it actually, I was under duress. I was forced to do it.
Okay.
By somebody else.
Under duress from the world conditions.
Yeah, the world condition. There you go. Let's put it that way. And then a colleague that I was working with at the time, who happened to be Tara, who was saying, you should do a podcast. It would be so great. And then the pandemic hit. There was like kind of a necessity to put a little bit more content out there when I couldn't see people face to face in the job that I was doing, which was a people care job. It met a couple of needs. And then pretty quickly I was like, no, I'm gonna need a co-host to help me do this. And then I was at the time Tara's boss. I'm not Tara's boss anymore. Now I'm her like business partner. But at the time I was her boss. So I was like, well, guess what? You had the idea, so now you're going to be on the podcast with me, and it's kind of worked out. But long story to say this, it has given us one of the greatest opportunities to get to meet some of the most wise, interesting people that you just wouldn't have. You know, we've learned about Indigenous things in Canada, like Canada's gone through. Recently, many settlers in Canada have discovered what it meant to turn Canada into Canada, and some of the darker things that we in particular as people did to our Indigenous people. And we've gotten to hear just some of the most incredible Indigenous people talk and tell their story and some of the challenges that they experience. And the podcast, I would assume it's just like, you know, your 10K is like, it gives you a reason to talk to really great people and a motivation to do it. Like, because I would say it's like, yeah, I've always wanted to, you know, get to know and build some relationships with people who aren't like me, but also people who are smarter than me or whatever on lots of levels. But you just don't do it unless you have a purpose. I in that regard, I definitely can hear what you're saying. Okay, so I had I had a question though for you, because I am assuming. So where are you at in terms of like how many people have you
have I met?
Yeah.
Yeah, because you did a few more after this morning too, right?
Yeah, I had one person, she was in Kenya. They had like a blackout and she couldn't join. So I have officially met 5,141 people.
So you're halfway there.
Yeah.
I was just going to ask, why 10,000? I don't know if I read that anywhere. You probably have it somewhere because I'm sure everybody asks you that.
Funny enough, I don't think I do have it anywhere. I guess because for me, it wasn't a big thing, I guess, as it is to other people. Like I didn't place a ton of significance on the number 10,000. For me, it was just, the way I describe it is, if you've ever heard of Seth Godin, the marketer, he has a book called The Purple Cow. And the concept is, if you're driving down the street and you pass a farm and you see a cow, you're not going to think twice. But if you're driving down the street and you pass a farm and you see a purple cow, they're like, oh, what is that? I'm going to get out. I'm going to take pictures. I'm going to post this to social media. So I think for me, meeting one new person or 10 new people or 100 new people was not going to be anything crazy. But to meet 10,000 people kind of colored the experiment purple, if that makes sense. And I think it was so big that it was daunting to people and it turned their heads and it made them interested. And I think for me, I also saw it as something where if I truly wanted to create my own path and I wanted my career to be built around connection, this was saying, okay, you're either doing this or you're not. Like, this is not a part-time job, because if you try to meet 10,000 people part-time, you're likely never going to complete that. But if you dive into it as a career and you give your full self to it, then it becomes your identity and it becomes your path. And I wanted that out of it. So I think it was just a number that was big enough for me. And it's such a clear-cut number. And then there's a very trivial thing, which was after the fact, but a little bit of confirmation bias. I think I Googled like how many people does the average person meet in their lifetime? And some admiral gave a commencement speech where he said the average American meets 10,000 people in their lifetime. So whether that's true or not, I was like, that'd be really interesting to see what happens if you, instead of doing that across your lifetime, you do it in the first 40 years of living. How does that inform and impact and affect the next, hopefully like 40 to 80 or 90 or whatnot?
Okay, I just love what you just said. It's like, no, I'm gonna hear all these stories before I'm 40.
Yeah.
So it'll change the next 40. I love it. It's very forward thinking. I think we all want to be smart, but we don't spend very much time working on being wise. And I do think that wisdom comes with having some knowledge, but then learning how to apply that and what's the application to the things that we know. And listening to story, because story gives so much context, not just to the individual you're listening to, but actually the whole of your story. Like I was listening to somebody, I'm going to not do this justice. We need like an armchair expert, like a fact check after this. But,
okay.
So no, it was a guy who was saying he was talking to a really wise person, and he was over in Europe somewhere. And the guy said, I want to go to Canada. He was a young man. He's like, it was the guy who was telling the story. So I said to him, I want to go to Canada. And this wise old guy, or person he had considered to be wise, said, you should go to Canada, and you should go by boat, so you can see how big this ball is that we live on. In other words, go on your journey and go slow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that you don't miss the things that are present. And was that random?
I like that though.
Was that random?
No, I think
I can relate. When I first took my project full time, and still today, how I get around the city is I ride my bike. Getting to know Philly by riding your bike is a much different experience than taking the subway or Ubering or whatever. It's a much more intimate experience. And because you're going slower, you notice this unique house, or you notice this unique park that you otherwise would have gone by too quickly. And yeah, I have an appreciation for commuting by bike. And then in terms of the slowness, a lot of people mistakenly think that I'm trying to like get through this journey as quickly as possible. So they'll hear of my story and they'll say, come to my party, you'll meet 50 people tonight. You'll be able to knock it out in no time. And then people, and they think that I'm doing the project to get it out of the way so I can use it to do something else. And it's not the case. It's the journey, not the destination. And I want to take my time with each person, and I want to meet like 3 people a day. So my energy is devoted to those people, and I'm very present for those meetings. And I think that concept misses a lot of people, because we obviously live in this society where it's like, go, 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 instant gratification, next thing. But yeah, it's very much a slow journey for me. The point is to stop and smell the roses, if you will.
Yeah, I love that. I actually appreciate that you said that too, because I was like, yeah, if you have 8-hour days and you do 8 people,
you like did the math.
You can do the math, and it's like, and I think you're absolutely right. The capacity to be fully present with like the 5th, 6th, and 7th person you meet in a day like that it's not there.
I was just gonna say, I made the same mistake as you when I was thinking about this initially. And if you look at my early emails to people, I say, hey, I'm going to finish this project in aggressively about 4 years. Because I just thought 8 hours a day, 8 people. And there's so much you don't think about. The commute in between meetings, the time it takes to set up a meeting with all the messaging back and forth, the time it takes to distill someone's story into a post that does them justice.
That's what I was thinking, was like, it's actually really impressive, because I was telling Evan when I got here, like between the time we hung up, I had like answered a few emails, messaged you, Wang got Theo, and we started breakfast, and then you had posted it. And I was really impressed with the detail that you brought to the post. And that takes time and really active listening, like information that we talked about in passing that I wasn't sure even mattered, or even, you could miss so easily in just a few minutes of moving on from your day. Or if you had to hang up and talk to someone else right away, how would that affect the project and how you capture everybody's stories? Were you always an intentional listener, or is this something you had to develop while you were doing this project?
I think I developed it through the project, because so in person and Zoom is a different experience, and the fact that when I meet people in person, I don't take notes at all. So, but I write with the same level of detail. And I think that's always surprised people. People will meet with me, and then like multiple times I've had comments of people saying, this is crazy, he doesn't take notes. All of this is from memory. And yeah, it's all from active listening. And I feel like I've developed strategies to help me with that. Like in person, for example, if I hear a quote that I feel like could be a quote that goes at the beginning, and there was a time when I never did quotes because I didn't want to be Humans of New York, if you're familiar with him. He does quotes. And I was like, I'm not this, I'm something else. And then I started doing quotes, and people started being like, I wonder what quote you'll use for me. And I was like, now I have to do quotes for everyone. So I just shifted into it. But if I hear something, a quote, I will tap it out on my shoulder somewhere to count how many words are in that quote. So then when I go to think back to it, for example, if you said something that was 10 words long, and I went and I thought back and I only had 8, I'm like, I'm missing 2. So I don't have this right. So that's a strategy that I'll employ. Or I'm a very visual person. So I literally watch people's lives as they tell them to me. And I think more people could do that. I describe it as if you're going to a movie, when you come out, you could explain the plot to someone because you just watched that movie. So for me, I'm not really listening. I'm watching their story as they talk to me. And then I can go back and see it. And it's really helpful for like schools or degrees or certain things. And I think just with the practice over time, my mind has gotten good at organizing. And then that's why I write everything right after, because then you start to lose stuff if you wait too long.
Well, those are some good tricks.
Yeah.
Okay, so now I had a couple questions for you about about some of the people you've met. So one of the questions I had was like, what's the most up there with one of the most like jaw-dropping, surprising stories you've heard? It doesn't have to be the, let's name names and all those things. That, and then my second question is, what are you going to quote about this conversation? Like, how many times was he tapping himself?
No.
But
it's always one out. Yeah.
Yeah. Have you had any of those moments where you're like, you've met with 5,100 people. You've had moments like that. So I'm just curious. Could you share one with us?
Yeah, several times. And I bring these people up a lot in my speaking now, and I think there's this other thing where if you think about human connection, like sometimes if my project is publicized through a media piece or whatever, there's always people who are like, oh, it's quality, not quantity. I don't need 10,000. They get so like targeted on the friends thing that they're like, you can't possibly have 10,000 friends. But I think they miss the point of what you can gain out of chatting with someone for an hour, even if you never see that person again. It doesn't mean that you won't think about them for a while to come. So I have a lot of people that I think about still that I haven't talked to in years, but I met them one time. And one of them is this girl, Bojana, who I met. She lives in Serbia. And so we did a Zoom call. So we saw like chest up. And early on in our conversation, she said, oh, it's been a while since I've shared my story. I used to share it a lot. And I thought, oh, okay, there's something here. So we dove into it, and I came to learn that in 2016, she went to a music festival with her friends and became the victim of a mass shooting. And the doctor said she was shot 6 to 7 times. She slipped into an 8-day coma, and in that time had to have her leg amputated. And she recovered and had nerve damage, but she was still able to get her computer science degree, computer programming. And that struck me because you see like this person, right? And going into it, you just assume that they're like anyone else. I haven't seen her Instagram or anything. And then you go through the pictures of their Instagram afterwards, and you see her prosthetic leg, and you see the pictures of her in the hospital and her talking through that experience. So that was definitely a punch in the gut. I just didn't see that coming. I've thought about it a lot since. I met a guy here in Philly who, when he was 16, he fell off of a boat, got run over by it. His legs got sucked up into the engines. He was given a 12% chance of walking and a 15% chance of living. Fortunately, beat both those odds. Told me the story as we were walking through Philly. Yeah, you think, and I was like, it's crazy, these decisions that we make, like one night, like if you just decided one different thing, how different your life would look. So I hear a lot of stories that make me think, or they give me new perspective. And it's often that it happens, like people losing loved ones to anything from, I've met people who have had loved ones that have been murdered or that have committed suicide and all this different stuff. So when I talk about like, I'm very lucky that I grew up in a family where I was loved and I didn't have trauma. It's because with each new conversation, I realized how lucky I was to have my path. So yeah, constantly being stopped in my tracks. And I think in a way, that's what makes meeting people so interesting too, because no one's story will be exactly the same as the person before them.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, those are some great examples of just being surprised by what the human spirit and what humans can endure, even in terms of struggle and pain and suffering, and then also like love and passion and mm-hmm. adversity and all those things like coming out on top. It is one of the things that most fascinates me about people's stories as well. Is just hearing, what did you learn? How how did this shape you? How has this changed you? What does this look like? And so you have like, not only do you lose your leg, but what other harm was caused, in the midst of that.
Yeah.
So it is an interesting thing, when you get to hear a survivor's story that can talk about some of the things that have happened sometimes to them, not by their own choice at all, and how they've been able to make their way through that pain and that suffering in order to kind of come out the other side, and even to recognize that some don't come out the other side, that actually they live with the story of pain and all those things. Have you had any I'm going to ask you another question that's more serious than this, but have you had any like really awkward ones where you're like, I'm really glad that hour's over?
I've had, so I say there's definitely been more difficult conversations where I will talk to people and I'll get like one word answers, and then I'll ask questions and I'll get one word answers. And within like 5 minutes, I'll know that it's going to be me talking the entire time. But I think I've gotten better at framing those conversations in my mind, because I've met so many. It's like you would assume everyone's going to come from a place where to meet a stranger, to have an hour conversation is a normal thing, something that they should be good at and happy with. But some of these people might come from places where they've been traumatized in the past, and them giving one word answers is them really stepping outside of their comfort zone. So I try to be conscious of that. And I've had people who are like, I'm sorry, I'm painfully shy and I have a ton of social anxiety, but this is me pushing my comfort zone. So I try to do that for people. And I'm like, I hope that they had a good conversation with me so they feel more like apt to do it again in the future. I've also had people who I don't really jive with their personality, and I'm like, oh, this is great. It's nice to talk to you. I don't think we ever need to hang out again, but it doesn't mean I didn't enjoy the 1 hour. Some people, if you get too close with them, then it kind of ruins the experience a bit. So there are people like that, but same thing. I'm always like, isn't it nice that you can still, even in that case, have an hour of good conversation with someone, even if you don't really agree with them or the way that they live their life, or if their personality doesn't get along with yours. I've never had a meeting that I like had to leave because I couldn't stand the person or anything like that. I've always been able to get through with people. And I think the reason being is they know I'm coming to the table with respect, and I know that they're coming to the table with respect. So yeah, like I come from a place of acknowledgement rather than judgment. And I think that helps a lot of people. And I think it helps them open up too. Because oftentimes, like, I don't care if they open up or not. We can keep it very surface level. To me, the important thing is that we're spending and sharing this time together. But a lot of people will just take you there on their own because they feel that sense of comfort of you not trying to pry. And then the other thing is, some of the most interesting stories I've heard don't appear that way on Instagram, just because it's not something that's for like the public. It's just for us. And I think that's a big thing too on my journey, is I'm not trying to entertain an audience with other people's stories. I'm trying to connect with people and hear their stories. And as a byproduct, I'll share some of that experience with this audience so they can see what it's like for two people to connect.
Oh, I like that. I do like that. Well, to your credit, like Tara has a little bit of anxiety about these kinds of things. Yeah. So she's freaking out last night just a bit. Yeah. Before your conversation.
Just a little message to you being like,
I changed my mind. And I just add to your credit, I got to finish my train of thought so you get this so I can get this compliment in. She did message me this morning and said that was a really great conversation. He was very easy to talk to. So
it is true.
Yeah. To your credit.
Yeah.
You did good. Yeah. And she does have a little bit of anxiety.
Yeah, I totally do. I don't like new things and new people, and meeting people for the first time, not my favorite thing. I said to you though on the call, I was like, if we had been able to do something, it probably would have felt a little bit less anxious. So if we would have been able to go for a walk or like go meet up somewhere at a coffee shop, I at least would have felt like
somewhere to put that nervous energy.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, a little bit. So that usually helps me.
What's funny about Tara is though, she feels that way. Nobody else around her, when they talk to her, feel that way. So
right.
everybody's like, that was the most pleasant conversation. I really like Tara.
Well, and I thought it was interesting what you're saying. Not that we can move on from me is what I'm doing.
No, let's talk more about Tara. Don't you think? We should do that.
Yeah. Anyways, what I said this morning and what I was curious about, and you kind of alluded to this too, is like, I was like, do people get really vulnerable with you? How do you manage that? Because you're carrying then a lot of stories of vulnerability if they choose to share really deep things. And then also, do you have some boundaries around like what you will and will not talk about? Or is it like, you'll go where people go?
Yeah, I pretty much just follow people where they go, and I try to be open and vulnerable as well. I would have to like sit down and think if there were certain topics I wouldn't go into or would go into. But I was telling Tara, like, I try to be really open with my story because I think from the outside looking in, a lot of people can look at a social media profile and be like, oh, this person's killing it. They're doing so well. Like, they're so confident. They don't doubt themselves. And yeah, I go through cycles of confidence and doubt every week. Like this week, like I do public speaking, and I am lost on how I reach out to people, or who, like, I'll go on LinkedIn and look for speakers, or I'll call universities. And when you do that for a few weeks and nothing promising is turned up, then you start to question yourself and be like, what am I doing with my life? And so I've gone through that and before I even had speaking, being in my because I had moved back in with my parents multiple times, being 30 years old in my childhood bedroom at home during the pandemic, not seeing any light at the end of the tunnel as to how I would ever not be living there, or how I'd be able to have the milestones of like my own house and getting married and stuff. You question yourself a lot, and I've always done that. But I guess the difference is I've just continued meeting people. So I anchored myself in that activity. Yeah. And I was like, I know meeting people, whether it's through the perspective or introductions or whatever, will keep me going as well. And a lot of people ask about like, is it hard to hear so many things, and how do you manage that? And I think for me, part of it is, I think I'm good at compartmentalizing. For some reason, I can hear a lot of really sad things in people's lives and not feel the need to solve that. I can just listen. I think a lot of people get caught up in like, well, I could help this person, or what could I do to help? And for me, I feel like sharing their story is a help. And it's also a help for me because it goes in my brain and then it comes out of my brain into a post that other people can interact with as well. And like I said, I don't share everything all the time, but for the most part, it's like a cycle that goes in and out. And I think that allows me to have a really healthy relationship with taking on other people's stories.
So what do you think you've learned about, like, this has been my observation, the more and more I listen to people, the more and more I learn about myself. I don't need to be selfish about it. That's not why I listen to people, but it gives me, it just sheds a different light on my own story, my own journey, the things I'm learning or whatever. So curious, what have you learned about yourself?
So I think coming from a tightly knit family is a really big thing. The overarching theme is gratitude. And growing up in a family where we ate dinner together every night, like my dad would come home from work, we would sit down, we'd say grace before meals, we would have dinner together. It was not like a grab and go type thing. So we had that time to build the bonds between my family, which have played out into adulthood. We're all very tight with each other. And the fact that I'm 31 years old and I still have both my parents and I still have both my siblings. I've met multiple people who are college students that are only children who've already lost both of their parents. And that will teach you real quick to value those people in your life. It's like 5,100 examples of this, but another one just to talk about like awareness. There was a girl that I met who was in a car accident. She was paralyzed from the chest down. And I asked her like what she noticed about being in a wheelchair versus when she had the ability to walk. And she said that sidewalks have a slight slant to them for rain runoff. And it's not something that you would notice when you're walking because it's slight. But if you're wheeling a wheelchair, you notice the chair wants to go to one side and one arm has to work harder than the other. And I think that's been like, that could be used as a theme for the experience because there's so many things that we're blind to, whether it's the student loan forms or the family trauma or whatever, or something as simple as a sidewalk slant. Like until you interact with that, you're blind to it.
Okay, last question for you, and because I know you've got to go, and so real quick, what are you hoping to give like when you're done, and actually maybe through the whole process, because I think we're catching it from you for sure. Yeah. But when you're done this whole project, what are you hoping to give the community in terms of what you've learned?
I think is the overarching theme. So yeah, I think my purpose is to infuse more empathy into the world. And I think I do that by being a positive example of human connection currently. And yeah, so sometimes when people talk, I said earlier that people think I'm rushing through to do this, to do something else. It's not the case because I'm already seeing the impact play out as I do it. So as an example, there's a girl that I met in Ethiopia. I can't remember if I brought her up on the podcast earlier. Yeah. But yeah, so she reached out to me a few weeks ago. She saw my project through the Kelly Clarkson show, and she decided she's going to meet 100 new people. And she was like, I already met 22. So I invited her to meet. I became the 26th person that she met. She was the 5,105th person that I met. And it's like, not only am I doing this now, but it's her plus 100 people. And then there's a kid in India who met with me and he wanted to do it. And he's trying to meet 1,000 people. So it's him plus 1,000 people. And there were these two cousins in Toronto who during the quarantine saw my story and wanted to do it. And they both met over 100 people. So like the impact is scaling just naturally. And I think that is empathy, because every time they sit down with someone and hear their story, their mind is growing the same way that mine has grown. And then there's like the level of me sharing it on Instagram, and the people who just follow my post and read other people's stories, like they have a better understanding of what other life paths look like. So I'm doing that now. And then speaking is certainly another level to that. So that's what I want to give to the community, is just like an awareness of each other that results in empathy.
Awesome.
That's amazing.
That's a great vision. Hey, we know that you got time constraints on you today, so we're gonna let you go. But again, Rob, thanks so much for sharing a little bit of the wisdom that you've gathered as you've listened to stories, and this has been really fun.
Yeah.
This has been a really great conversation. How can people can follow you on Instagram? Rob, it's at Rob K.
At Rob's 10K friends. So ROBS 10K friends.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And if somebody wants to have a chat with you, they can get in touch with you there?
Yeah, shoot me a direct message on Instagram and follow up, because I do get a lot of them, but if I see them come up and I see that people have reached out multiple times, I know they're interested. So I want to meet everyone. Sometimes the messages fall through the cracks, but if they don't hear back, it's not because I'm not interested in them. It's because it just got buried.
You got buried. Yeah. We'll tell them to say they heard you on Unpacked.
Yeah.
They'll get a discount. We'll get in right away. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Awesome. Hey, thanks so much for your time. I'm looking forward to my conversation with you. I know that we're back and forth, but because I don't respond to emails very well. But I'm definitely looking forward to chatting with you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks so much for your time, man.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
Hey, thanks for joining us. We'd love if you take a moment to rate, subscribe, and review the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Again, thanks for listening.